We reported extensively yesterday on the likely resumption of peace talks, 4 months of indirect talks between Israel and the Palestinians. George Mitchell, President Obama's Middle East envoy, will shuttle between the two sides. Today, the Israeli newspaper Haaretz reports that the talks could begin as early as this Sunday. Well, few people know the Middle East as well as our next guest. Martin Fletcher spent nearly 20 years as the Tel Aviv bureau chief for NBC News. Over the years, he's reported from scores of countries, including Afghanistan, Iran and Somalia. He recounts those experiences in his book, Breaking News. Martin, welcome to the programme.
Thank you.
So, you know, when we hear about Israel, when we hear about the West Bank, it's mostly stories of violence. What is it, do you think, that Americans aren't hearing about that part of the world?
Well, you know, it's a good question. There's a great untold story, of course, which is that Israel, despite the absolutely accurate and imperative need to solve its problem with the Palestinians, is nevertheless a great place. You know, so many people call me up and they say, "Hey, Martin, is it safe to come visit Israel?" And I say, yeah, sure, of course, come. And then a week later, they call me again. They say, wow, it's a great place. I had no idea. So that great place is, I think, a story that is untold about Israel. And by the way, it's also the subject of my next book.
Right. So these are some of the stories that we're not getting to hear about. Is there a couple that you can recount, perhaps very briefly, that you can tell through your own experiences that might surprise American viewers that perhaps didn't make it onto the air?
Well, you know, I think the Hightech story is an incredible story in Israel, which a guy called Dan Sinor just wrote a very good book about. You know, every high-tech fair in New York, for instance, has more than half of the companies involved come from tiny Israel. So the story of how they brought into their country a million Russians in 10 years and how they developed their high-tech and their technology industries and, of course, the weapons industries is a great untold story. It's another way of looking at Israel, not from the point of view of violence.
Right, let's talk just very quickly about the news business for a moment. This is a very traumatic time, as you know, for the news industry. News organizations are scaling down their operations. As somebody who has worked in international news, do you worry about what's going to happen to foreign news reporting and coverage?
I no longer worry about it because I know what's going to happen. It's disappearing, and it's a tragedy. But it's also changing. And the point is, of course, that people are not watching broadcast news in the numbers they used to. But if you want to watch news, foreign news, for instance, on NBC or ABC, CBS, it's there, but it's on their websites. So it's changed. So it's true that you don't need these gigantic operations that we had. We used to have 15 staff people in the Tel Aviv bureau, for instance, at NBC News. Now there's 3. ABC, CBS, same story. But the stories they're doing, which are not appearing on the broadcast, are appearing on the internet. So it's a matter of going where the audience is. So there's less foreign news on the networks, but more on the internet, and that's where we have to go.
Sometimes the argument is made that Americans find it really hard to kind of get their head around international issues, that they somehow find it too abstract. Is this something that you buy into, and do you think that it's even true?
Certainly it's true. I had a producer of mine once. I was doing a swing through Afghanistan, Turkmenistan, Afghanistan, and he called me and said, "Don't give me any more stories from any countries that end in Stan." Well, so we didn't know much about Afghanistan when it broke out. So we don't know enough about foreign news, and the question is whether Americans care. And our job is to make them care by doing stories that are important in a very interesting way.
Okay, Martin Fletcher, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you for having me. Thanks.